Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Cybersecurity for Critical Infrastructures, Resilience and Trust in the Health and Energy Sectors webinar hosted by the Cyberwatching.eu project. The foundation for this webinar, of course, is that due to increasing global connectivity, we are seeing that, and the rise of IoT and other emerging technologies, that there is the possibility for significant impact on critical infrastructures and services. If these are disrupted, they can all, of course, have huge impacts nationally and internationally. We've got a two-part webinar today talking about first the energy sector and then, following a brief break, the health sector. We're going to start off with a brief introduction to some work within the Cyberwatching project on the Cyberwatching radar and the cybersecurity clusters of EC projects with myself and my colleague Marina. After that, we'll have a brief keynote from Martin Wimmer and then move into our panel. So I will just start sharing my screen. I hope you can see this now. I'm Dave Wallom from the University of Oxford, and I'm going to be talking about the Cyberwatching.eu radar. Within the Cyberwatching project, one of the key things, of course...
Excuse me, David, we cannot see your screen, or at least I cannot see it.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
So within the Cyberwatching project, of course, as a support action, we are aiming to do three things. We're about clustering and synergizing, bringing projects together, about engaging with them and supporting them. And when we talk about projects, there have been over 250 cybersecurity related projects that started that we've looked at, that started with it from around February 2008. And the European Commission has spent over 765 million on relevant projects in this domain. So here we've come out with, thanks to my colleague Marina, a sort of timeline of actually how we go about our clustering and synergizing activities and how we come out with allowing our projects to understand both the landscape and their place in it. And of course, we start off with the information source. We gain oversight, we gain our information from the Cyberwatching European Project Hub, which is a single authoritative source for project information around cybersecurity related projects that the project's been developing since it began. So that's our authoritative information source, which we're then able to use in other activities within the project. And I'm going to talk now about the project radar, the Cyberwatching project radar that we've developed during the activity to showcase the innovation landscape. So where all the projects have been deployed and how we understand the Cyberwatching landscape, research landscape as a whole. The first part of this, of course, is if you're going to understand the landscape, is to develop a taxonomy. So to develop a way of annotating the landscape to understand where projects can sit. And we've done that within Cyberwatching with our cybersecurity and privacy research taxonomy. And the important part here are the taxonomy level 2 on the right-hand side, the clusters. And we've come out with 6 categories effectively that we're able to assign projects to, which segments the landscape in an appropriately fine-grained way that we're able to understand how projects are different from each other, but at the same time not so much that it becomes confusing and difficult to understand. And the topics here range from everything from operational risk and analytics, secure systems and technologies, right through to the human aspects of cybersecurity. So we're able to cover all of and assign of any of the projects within this domain to one of these clusters. So how do we actually then utilize this information within the radar? And the first way, of course, within a radar is this idea of segmentation and presentation of a landscape as a whole, and radars are a circular view. And we segment the landscape according to each of those members within the taxonomy, within the cluster taxonomy that I mentioned a moment ago. So we have 6 segments the radar is divided into, and we have 6 taxonomy terms. So that's our assignments. Building on from that, of course, then a radar, the closer you are to the center of radar, the more important you are. And we've done that within the Cyberwatching.eu radar by utilizing a project's age as a means to understand where in their development life cycle that project is sitting. And utilizing that, the ThoughtWorks ideas around how a project should first be assessed, its output should then be trialed. If it's of high quality, then it's adopted. And as it moves through its life cycle towards completion, it may be held and continued in usage and then finally dropped. So you can see here that we've utilized that on the right-hand side with this idea that a project joins about halfway through the radar, progresses down towards into the center, and then back out to the outside. Now, of course, how do we actually present the projects themselves? Where there are blips, and each project is given a unique reference number. And as Marina will be talking around later, we've actually utilized an extra method of information, an extra dimension of presentation through coloring of our blips to represent their market and technology readiness levels. Basically, red is not very good and green is very good is the way to describe this, to showcase this. So let's have a look at our radar. So we started our first radar in autumn 2018, and as you can see here, we are uncolored. None of our projects had completed an MTRL assessment. I'm going to highlight one particular project because I'd like to showcase its journey through the radar. This is project number 52, which is GHOST, Safeguarding Home IoT Environments with Personalized Real-Time Risk Control. This is the entry within the project hub for GHOST that's linkable directly from the radar. So let's see how GHOST got on from 2018. So it entered in the assess portion. It didn't have an MTRL assessment. By 6 months later, it was still in the same state. It hadn't moved in terms of its lifetime. It hadn't moved in terms of its development, and it hadn't been assessed. By autumn 2019, though, as you can see here, the blip has actually turned yellow. So it's had its first MTRL assessment, and it is performing mid-range in its progression, in its understanding of market readiness. By spring 2020, actually, first of all, it's performed another MTRL assessment, so it's now gone green. So it's a highly performing project with products that are readier to launch for market. But you can see here, it's also progressed to the center. It's actually at a point where it can be adopted. So this is now a project where its outputs have been, we're sort of starting to recommend that its outputs can be used by others outside that project itself. Autumn 2020, it's still sitting there in adopt. It's still got a good quality MTRL assessment score. In the late, so that's the sort of past editions of the radar, and I'm now going to talk about the current edition, the live edition of the radar. And we can see here now that in the 6 months since autumn 2020, that the project has ended, and therefore the GHOST project's blip has moved into the hold segment. We're still highlighting it here. One of the things with the live radar, though, is that we are able, of course, to drill down better into the information set that we've got. So we're able to showcase within this the highlight information for a particular project. So we can get some of the information from Cordis around the project itself. We get an understanding of its MTRL assessment, where it sits. But you can see here also at the bottom, we have added the capability to tag projects with the JRC taxonomy. And when I talk about the JRC taxonomy and how we utilize that, we can see we have the JRC taxonomy filter here. And as is relevant to this webinar, I'm going to highlight the energy and health sectors and apply those as a filter to all of the projects that are listed within the project radar. And here we are. So we've got 30 projects. And what I've done is I've done that a project can be tagged with either energy or health. We've got 30 projects of various different types, an average duration of about 39 months. We've got 98 years worth of effort, and we're spending 6 million euros as an average budget. But in total, we're spending 182.5 million euros on energy and health related projects. Now, of course, that's across the different sectors. So secure systems is once again a highly populated area, the sort of foundation of what many people think about cybersecurity. But we can see that other areas are reasonably populated. Unfortunately, human aspects is a very lowly populated domain we found, which is quite a surprise for us, I think. But then what I thought was I'd drill down a bit further and look at a more coincidence. So to get energy and software and hardware security engineering. So people that are actually developing the services themselves. And we can see here that we've come down to 6 projects within secure systems. And I'm going to highlight project 160, which is SealedGRID, which we're going to hear about later from one of our speakers. And we can see here now that we're able to look at projects live and understand where they sit within the landscape. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Marina. Over to you, Marina, who's going to be talking about our readiness analysis.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Well, one of the main goals of Cyberwatching is to improve the impact of the results of the research and innovation project in cybersecurity and privacy in the European Union and associated countries. And to achieve this goal, the overall Cyberwatching methodology is founded, as David said, on these 3 macro activities. The first one is clustering and trying to create synergies among the different EU-funded projects in cybersecurity and privacy domain. The second one is engaging then, I think it was the previous slide. Okay, no problem. The second one is engaging them and also engaging other relevant stakeholders like SMEs, clusters, policymakers. And the third one, the last macro activity, is supporting all this collaboration framework with different activities. Different activities, within the first macro activity of clustering and synergizing projects, we have a workflow starting by mapping and clustering project to gain oversight. Then we have the project radar that David presented, to have a clear idea of the innovation landscape. To complement the functionalities of the project radar, we need to give the chance to all projects to periodically self-assess their status to check exactly where they are in terms of market and technology readiness in a specific time of the project. And when they are ready enough, we have been offering the necessary support for dissemination and commercialization through our marketplace and other promotional activities. In the third step of the workflow, the readiness analysis, is where we introduce the MTRL concept. And what is the MTRL? MTRL is the market and technology readiness levels. That is a methodology that allows projects to assess how close to the market their outcomes are by measuring both their current technologies and market readiness levels. Since 2018, we have been actively assessing the MTRL status of the projects each 6 months to check their evolution, which it has been helpful to prepare specific actions for projects under similar advances in MRL and TRL values. We have been doing this by sending to the projects in the Project Hub an Excel template with 9 simple questions related to the technology and market readiness. With the launch of the last version of the radar that you have seen is a live radar, now we have transformed the template into an online tool that improves the accuracy of the project radar, giving different colors to the projects according to their MTRL status. Next slide, please. But projects can still use the downloadable template with these 9 questions. So you only have to go to this MTRL questionnaire, answer the 9 questions, and you will have the response, and you will get your MTRL score. Next slide, please. With the project clustering and classification, together with the MTRL self-assessment, we go directly to the next macro activity of engaging. With this aim of engaging, we have organized different meetings with projects with similar market readiness scores to analyze their commonalities. And we have identified 6 clusters of projects around a specific topic of common interest for a few of them. Then we have created a specific section in Cyberwatching website to give them the chance to connect one to each other. And in this section of the website, you can apply to join any of the proposed clusters, or you can even propose a new project cluster. As you can see in this slide, 2 of the clusters of projects that have been identified are energy and healthcare, the topics that will be discussed later today. Currently, we have also published 2 more clusters, the critical infrastructure and finance clusters, and 2 more will be published in the coming days around GDPR and threat intelligence. For each cluster of projects, we have identified their objectives, the challenges they try to solve, what are the solutions that they are proposing to solve them, who are the main beneficiaries of their solutions, and what are the expected impacts from their projects. We also link in this section to the mini site of each of the projects in a cluster to give them visibility. And then, next slide, please. Then we get to the final macro activity of the project, supporting them. And we have different tools within Cyberwatching to support projects. We can help with the mapping of projects in the project radar. We can help with the specific sections for cluster of projects, identifying common challenges and showing their solutions. We can help with the market and technology readiness self-assessment tool. We can also support them in organizing webinars for joint dissemination. And we finally offer the marketplace to facilitate the exploitation of the results. Next slide, please. And as you know, Cyberwatching is coming to its end, but this is not the end for the clustering activities. There are a few initiatives of projects working together in common dissemination activities, like the GDPR cluster, the Trustee initiative, the data privacy and cloud security cluster, the Cyber Range Network, or the European cluster for securing critical infrastructure. And to accommodate activities to support clusters of projects, the European Commission launched the Horizon Result Booster, and that is a new package of 3 specialized services delivered to all ongoing and closed FP7 and H2020 projects at no cost. What is a great opportunity for the identified cluster of projects and new ones that may arise in the future to access services that allow them to improve their results. And now I would like to give the floor to Martin Wimmer, Principal Key Expert at Siemens and participating in the CyberSec4Europe project, that will give an overview of horizontal challenges for cybersecurity in the critical infrastructure sector. Martin, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thanks, Marina, for the introduction. Let me start sharing my screen and let me know. I hope it's working. So,
yes, it is indeed. Thank you, Martin.
So you can see the main screen, the whole.
Yep.
picture.
Yes, you're in presentation view.
Okay. So yeah, thanks. And let me take the opportunity for the next 15 minutes roughly to go and have a look and talk about cybersecurity challenges, which I think that are quite common across different domains of critical infrastructures, like for example, energy, e-health, as we will talk about today, or also transportation. Before having a closer look at those, let me go maybe one step back and first talk about operational technology. And you will see in a second why I will do so, because OT is basically the ground, the starting base for all critical infrastructures. And OT, of course, you know it, are the components that are interacting with the physical world. And what is very important when we talk about security is that the main predominant security model in use for OT is the one of secure islands. So you have strictly decoupled network zones, not directly or fully open to the outside world. And this is quite crucial. This has been a model since decades. And also, I have to say, of course, OT environments are also systems that represent high investments and that stay there for quite a while. But what has changed over the last years, and where we see a steady increase, is the importance of software instead, in contrast to classical OT business or boxes, selling boxes as we always call it. So the amount software plays a role here steadily increases already today, but we see this steadily increasing also and expect that it highly increases also in the next years. And this is for enabling new use cases, like the ones you typically might think of are predictive monitoring and remote maintenance, for example, the first one coming into play here, but also for enabling new features or functionality over the lifetime. You sell the device once, but you enable new functionality and change functionality over time. And that, of course, in the end results in OT and IT getting closer to each other. But what does that mean with regard to security? Because the question is IT security and OT security the same? And yeah, obviously, you know it, it's not the case. On this page, I tried to compare briefly both approaches or both domains, basically. And it starts actually just right from the start when you think about what is the lifetime of assets. And you know it from personal private use when you think about your cell devices, cell phones, your laptops and tablets. Those only have a lifetime of a few years. Then you basically think about getting the next one. In the OT environment, it's completely different. We sell devices that are there for decades, really, depending, of course, on the field of application. But when you think about transportation, they are there for really decades, 40 years or even plus. And when you think about the software lifecycle also, yeah, we're all quite used to updating our Windows operating systems, our applications on Android and so on. But in the OT domain, it's not that trivial. Even when you think about a vendor being able to provide software updates, the question is whether you can roll them out, in particular in environments when we talk about critical infrastructures, because there the environments get evaluated, certified, and approved by the customers or by officials. And you cannot just change the software because then you're changing the system and you will have to restart the whole process over and over again. And in addition, it's also not that trivial to put new or updated software on, and in particular, when you think about new software that implements new kinds of security features, because you don't usually have enough free resources there. So typically in the OT domain, you apply a risk-based approach, but now that IT and OT get closer together, of course, also the attack surface increases and new things or new kinds of access, and also there with attack possibilities are given. And I just want to highlight a few well-known examples, I think, of what can go wrong. So many of you might know it. I just picked a few ones, like, let me take the laser pointer one. You might know is the one from the attack on the Ukrainian power grid a few years ago, where there was a huge outage and many people, many households were affected. Also in the recent years, there was an attack on petrochemical plant in Saudi Arabia. It was thought of being closely related to Saudi Aramco, but that never got really officially confirmed, and also no further details were made public. And the recent, or quite recent one, was the one that affected Colonial, the operator of the biggest gasoline pipeline, affecting lots of people in the US of not being able to get petrol and gas any longer for quite some days. And this was a kind of ransomware attack. In general, the attackers are usually well organized and well funded, often also by states, but only limited information is usually made available about those attacks. Why? Well, because usually want to keep it confidential, and they don't want to lose their reputation, and they also don't want to provide details on whether they paid ransomware and how much, because they don't want to motivate followers. So attackers typically exploit vulnerabilities, and there is also kind of shortcomings of OT environments when they get remotely accessible. And I just picked one example, again, the one with the Ukrainian power grid, where Industria was used, and the firms analyzing the attack, they also highlighted that the problem there was that the protocols that were attacked or that were used for the attack were designed decades ago without that kind of security or security requirement in mind. So as mentioned a few slides ago, the idea was always for OT, or quite prominent for OT environments, that you have closed, isolated environments. And this typically is no longer true when we think about interconnected systems, IoT systems, and the like. Of course, what can be done is we can try to cluster, to categorize such kind of attacks, or just try to do some kind of grouping here, whereby I have to say and admit this is maybe not 100% perfect and distinct, because there are, of course, certain overlaps. But what we have seen also with the attacks, there can be some that are affecting the whole SCADA system, though the attacker tries to take over the whole operations and take over control of the environment. We can also think about typical phishing attacks, as we know it also from consumer IoT, IT domains. But also in this regard, we have also IP data when you think about manufacturing recipes that can be stolen and the like. I already gave an example about ransomware with regards to Colonial, and quite typical attacks are, of course, affecting also the communication, the protocols, which I already mentioned as the target of attack. What I did not address so far are supply chain security attacks, which are quite tricky and complex, but maybe give me the opportunity to have a quick look at it, also in my role as participating in the EU project CyberSec4Europe, because this is something that we are having a look at in Cybersec4Europe as well. You know it, Cybersec4Europe is one of the pilots of European cybersecurity competence networks, so together with the 3 other ones, Concordia, Sparta, and Echo. It also has a strong research and evaluation track. This is the one when you have a look at the work package that can be shown here. And one of the demonstrators, this is also the one that I'm engaged in, is exactly actually focusing on supply chain security. And what we are doing there is really to start with having a look at the research roadmap, trying to find out what are the targets or the challenges, but also the opportunities of where can we or where can the EU get stronger and take over some kind of leading role when it comes to development of how to make supply chains, highly distributed and heterogeneous environments, more secure. In combination, we are also having a look at certain technologies that can be used there. In concrete, we are having a look at blockchain technology, which we are then evaluating also in our demonstration use cases. And the one I'm talking about is basically about having a look at how to build up trust in this distributed environment where multiple actors, suppliers, sub-suppliers, and so on come into play. But of course, apart from customers, also auditors, so external parties certifying certain steps in the supply chain. And what we want to do in Cybersec4Europe, where we've put our focus on, is in particular to have a look at accountability and about conflict resolution. Supply chain security, I have to say, is a quite complex and broad topic. You also have different aspects there, like security of software, of also hardware, which you get, and you want to make sure that no backdoors and so on are included. We cannot and will not address everything. Here we particularly have a look at how to really enable the possibility to track and trace things that happen in the supply chain and to manage account or to reach accountability. And we see really good possibilities to keep control of the distributed systems by means of also using a distributed ledger technology like blockchain. And the benefits you can use blockchain for. Blockchain is often a kind of buzzword, of course, but it also has really meaningful use cases. And this is, from my point of view, one where you can apply it really to track and trace things that happen in the supply chain, like tracking and tracing of food and beverages. And when it comes to a recall, you can use that approach to identify individual batches and do recalls more better and isolated than recalling everything from a certain time frame, which is more cost intensive and has significant side effects also on the economy, of course. So this is just one example out of a lot of kind of attack surfaces and how to protect against attacks, how to make things more secure, systems more secure. I only have limited time, but maybe give me one more minute to have a look at one additional one. And this is the communication and protocol kind of attack, because I think this is really a quite important one when we talk about interconnected systems. And as I mentioned in the beginning, this I see as a crucial challenge every industry is now facing when opening their OT environments, the manufacturing sites, back-end infrastructures by means of making remote new services possible. And how we can address this and make it also more secure, I want to briefly show you one component. This is in fact a Siemens product, which you can see here. It's basically a data diode. Well, you know that Siemens, we are not primarily seen as a provider of security services or devices. We are basically engaged in industry, transportation, energy, also in health. But for providing services to our customers, we also depend on a secure communication. Of course, customers demand for new services. They know from others as well, so we have to offer it. But we need to make it secure. And this is where we need, for example, a feature like the data diode for. And on this page, I just want to briefly compare firewalls and data diodes, because firewalls are quite known to everyone. And firewalls are typically seen as the tool of choice when it comes to connecting different network zones. But firewalls as well can be targets of the attack because they have a software stack. You need to configure it. You need to maintain and operate it reliably. So there is also the human factor. You can do things wrong, and there's also the operational factor. You need to keep your system, the firewall, up to date. It's not to say firewalls are bad. It's just to say data diodes provide a higher level of security because they provide a real physical separation of network segments. And this really helps to address the security needs when it comes to connect OT environments to backend systems or to cloud-based environments, because we still, by using that component, can have a clear and unbreakable network separation. And that way, attackers, they might succeed in breaking the connectivity so that no transfer of data to cloud environments is happening any longer. But what they cannot do is they can break into the system, get into the OT environment. And this is basically quite helpful for a lot of use cases where you think of, for example, remote maintenance and predictive monitoring. There you need to get access to the data that is accessible and created and produced by the OT environment. But you don't need to send command and control messages to the system. You just need to constantly get up-to-date information. So you need an always-on connectivity in this picture from the left to the right. And the DCU really helps to, or the data diet, as I mentioned it, really helps to keep this strict separation in a way that no one can communicate from the outside to the inside. Whatever they are doing, whatever kind of software stack you try to attack, you cannot break the hardware implementation, but you still can keep the outbound connectivity on. So this is a good way of enabling new features, but still keeping the level of security you need to have and you expect for the OT environment up and running. So not to change the assumptions on the left-hand side. So having that, all that and the two examples I gave, what I wanted to emphasize in my brief introduction is basically that we really see a steady increase of the attack surface with opening OT environments to the outside. So the business models change, new customer requirements come in that need to be addressed. So there is a need to do it. So systems are getting interconnected or are already interconnected. This is a fact, but this is somewhat in conflict with the previous or the still existing security model of OT environment. The question there is are we prepared for that? And how do we react? And what I try to highlight here on the right-hand side is the typical kind of behavior. So as long as nothing goes wrong, often there is no need to react or no need to react as seen and to get prepared. But this is, of course, a tricky situation. This is also sometimes because of budget limitations, to be honest. But in fact, we have to get prepared and we need to be prepared for not running into a very tricky, very difficult situation and then only being able to react when it is already too late. So with having said all that, I want to hand over to David again and the panel discussion on the security landscape and looking forward to get to know what is happening there. So,
okay, well, thank you very much, Martin. Thank you. You want to stop sharing your screen, then I will then start the panel addressing cybersecurity vulnerabilities in the energy sector. We have 2-minute opening statements from each of our panelists. I'd ask that my panelists, which is Panagiotis Sarigiannidis from the University of Western Macedonia, Lavinia Dinca from SIMAVI, Christos Fakitsas from University of Piraeus, Sofia Tsekeridou from INTRASOFT International, and Clemente Fuggini from RINA will please turn on their cameras so that we can see our panelists. And then I'm going to hand over first of all to Panagiotis to give the a 2-minute opening statement, and we'll go through each of the panelists from there. So over to Panagiotis.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just a flash note from my side. Thank you for this great opportunity. I'm representing SDN-microSENSE project, EU-funded project coming from DS4. Let me share the consortium very fast. It's a large project including 33 partners, energy providers, TSOs, DSOs, utilities, manufacturers, prosumers, technology providers coming across Europe. Consists SDN-microSENSE consortium. This is the main business logic behind the project. Just 4 steps, very fast. I will describe the 4 steps. The first has to do with the risk assessment. As previously mentioned, it's quite important to know what is the weaknesses of the environment. Then the intrusion detection and the prevention comes into place in the energy power system. Then the mitigation stage in order to come up and resolve any gaps, threats, and cybersecurity attacks. And finally, we have also a step regarding energy optimization, energy balancing, isolation, and energy trading between the microgrids and the renewable energy resources. I was very happy to discuss with you and talk about several very important issues like the cooperation of the cross-border and cascading effects, the protection of legacy systems, and the real-time requirement challenges for the infrastructure components. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Panagiotis. Okay, if I hand over to Lavinia.
I think you are muted, Lavinia.
Lavinia, yeah,
I'm muted.
Yes, okay.
I'm going to quickly make an introduction of the EnergyShield project, which is developing a cyber toolkit that protects the energy grid. The EnergyShield project consists of 5 interconnected tools that help us that we can find in the in the EnergyShield project are a security behavioral analysis tool that identifies the entry points of in the network. Using these entry points, we can develop countermeasures and increase the security awareness among the users. Another tool that is present in the kit, it's the vulnerability assessment module that allows us to identify the most probable way an attacker can penetrate the system. And moreover, we can also do some threat modeling using this tool. Another component of the EnergyShield toolkit is the distributed denial of service tool, which allows us to basically secure the entire energy infrastructure when we are under attack by flooding. The anomaly detection tool, also present in the kit, helps us recognizing the attack before any damage has been done, and we can detect anomalies within the network. All these 4 tools that I mentioned are integrated in CM, a security information and event management system that creates an overall idea of the entire system weaknesses, and they provide the users a way to react and defend an attack, thus protecting the critical infrastructure. This is my short presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Lavinia. Okay, I'll now hand over to Christos. Okay, thank you, Christos.
Hello, thank you. Thank you from my side. Thank you for organizing this webinar, and thanks to all attendees. As it is known, the smart grid is exposed to security threats and inherited from the ICT sector. However, privacy issues and new vulnerabilities related to the specific characteristic of smart grid infrastructures have emerged. SealedGRID is an EU-funded project developing the security platform that is tailored to the smart grid. This platform is able to efficiently manage the abundance of smart grid nodes, to deal with potential malicious hardware or software modifications due to the physical access of the stakeholders to the smart grid nodes, and to operate over heterogeneous systems. The platform is combining technologies like blockchain, distributed hash tables, and trusted execution environments, as well as OpenID Connect. It consists mainly of three components. The first one is trusted computing and privacy protection that enables a secure and private communication among participants. The second one is the key management and authentication that ensures scalability and flexibility of the smart grid, utilizing the SealedGRID platform without compromising the security and seamlessly operation. And finally, the third one is the authorization and security interoperability that allows the complacency with the policy rules and standards of the industry, considering the health state of the context at all times, and also allowing the cooperation of SealedGRID with similar platforms already utilized by grid operation or utilities. Right now, we have completed the development of the three aforementioned components, and we are currently working on the integration. This will give us the ability to deploy and test the platform in real use cases. Thank you. This was my short
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christos. Okay, I'll now hand over to Sofia.
Let me share my screen.
Okay.
I hope you can see it.
Yes, we.
Okay, my name is Sofia Tsekeridou. Thank you very much for the invitation. I represent the Phoenix project that has been also funded under the DS4 call. The Phoenix vision and scope is the following. It has three major objectives. To strengthen the EPES cybersecurity preparedness, to coordinate the EPES cyber incident discovery, response, and recovery, and to accelerate research and innovations in EPES cybersecurity solutions. You can access for more information the Phoenix website. The consortium is composed of 24 partners, a number of them being technical and scientific partners, but we have a large number also of EPES stakeholders involved. Now, in summary, the approach of the Phoenix is as follows. We, of course, aim to extend today's legacy EPES systems and integrate them efficiently in a secure and trusted way towards a next-generation cyber-secure cooperative EPES ecosystem involving all stakeholders in the process, both EPES stakeholders, utilities, TSOs, DSOs, etc., but also technology providers, and following the relevant directives and initiatives, as well as bodies like the EU directives, NIS, and now the reformed NIS2 directive, and NISA and CSERTs, different regulation agencies at national level and their policies. So how are we going to be doing that? Of course, or we are doing that already. We have evaluated the state of the art and what has been developed within other projects or even at industry level, and try to design the Phoenix ecosystem following a resilience, survivability, self-healing, and privacy by design approach, and a continuous DevSecOps approach for the complete integration and testing of the system. The innovations brought into Phoenix first include the development of a universal secure gateway for integrating and gathering data from legacy EPES devices and applications. The development of a data-centric, secure, persistent communications layer, capitalizing on blockchain and interledger transactions, GPU-assisted machine learning offline and online framework, also proposing a privacy-preserving, secure, federated machine learning training approach across EPES infrastructures, and quite an innovative approach and methodology, as well as platform being developed, is the cooperative, fully distributed incidents information sharing platform. Of course, all this is done by following what has been defined in the cybersecurity certification landscape, and we will also propose relevant certification schemes and training. We, of course, envision quite large-scale pilots. I will present them in a while. So to give a more detailed insight of the Phoenix architecture, as I said, we are devising the Universal Secure Gateway, but also a secure API for potential new equipment or devices to be put into the market in future. The exchange of data with the Phoenix subsystems. Phoenix is a distributed ecosystem, I have to say, is utilizing where available SDN and 5G networks for the real-time streaming and access to data requirements, and blockchain is considered quorum permissioned private blockchain for the secure and persistent communications layer development. There is a trusted interledger transactions layer because it might be also cases that other blockchain networks are used, like Ethereum. And the three major components of the Phoenix ecosystem that is deployed on the network infrastructure are the situation awareness, perception, and comprehension component, the incident mitigation enforcement countermeasures component, and the privacy protection enforcement, because further from cybersecurity incidents and threats, also privacy cases are handled by Phoenix. And finally, there is a distributed pan-European instance information sharing platform that each instance of the Phoenix EPES ecosystem is sending information to different nodes of the I2SP platform, which can be shared across also with the relevant national and pan-European bodies like CERTS and CSERTS, as well as ISACs. And finally, to conclude, not to take more time, we envision, and these have already started, 5 diverse large-scale pilots, starting from more focused national ones in Italy, Greece, but also moving towards cross-border ones, and one that involves a pan-European context of threat information sharing.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sofia. Okay, with some urgency now, we'll hand over to Clemente Fuggini.
Yes, good morning. I hope you can hear me clearly.
We can indeed, and I can see your screen. If you want to start your brief intervention.
Yes. So first of all, thanks for giving us the opportunity to attend this event and provide our contribution to the discussion. So first thing to say, differently from the project presented so far, we are focusing on a different energy infrastructure, the oil and gas one, and specifically in the gas one. And also the project is addressing a different topic, which was the protection of critical infrastructure. So cyber is part of it, but it's not the only threats that we are going to tackle. That's why we will have an approach to correlate cyber and physical threats mainly, basically. So gas network is a very distributed network, first of all. That's an important thing, which has cross-border, cross-national dimension. So cascading effect among cross-border and cross-border dimension is essential for a gas network and for the independency, of course, of gas supply in Europe and abroad. We are then focused on 3 specific areas, Italy, Greece, and Lithuania, for making the pilots, otherwise would have been impossible in only 2 years. The objectives is the security and resilience of the gas network and all is a critical installation against cyber and physical threats and their combination. Of course, this is the tricky point. And as you can see in this slide that you know very well, the oil and gas sector is not a sector per se, but is evenly correlated and dependent on the other sector, the power one, of course. So an attack to the electricity network, an attack to the power sector, an attack to a communication sector, for sure will have an impact also on the oil and gas pipelines and the supply. Cyber on the oil and gas. Of course, whilst for physical threats, we have a huge database and the reporting of incidents so far since the 1917, for the cyber one, we have really less information. Incidents are happening, their frequency is becoming even more frequent, also in the gas sector. Of course, their impact, we know very well, it's quite high. The 2 main types of attacks experienced so far are ransomware attacks and cyber attacks on the OT network of SCADA system. For ransomware, we had a very nice experience, not for them, a very interesting for a scientific point of view or for project point of view experience recently, which was the cyber attack to the Colonial pipeline, the largest fuel pipeline in the US, who had to cut down their production for the first time in their 57 years history. So you can easily understand that the impact of this type of attack on an oil and gas pipeline and network is quite huge, apart from the financial, of course, and reputational ones. So how we are tackling all these things, which are very complex, by a set of components which are looking at different aspects of the situational awareness picture and the decision support for the end user. And some of them are specifically dealing with cyber threats and cyber countermeasure, and as well correlation of cyber and physical issues. So we have a cyber physical correlator, we have a joint cyber physical resilience management tool and approach, we have a cyber security solution for IT and OT network weakness, we have probes, so we have all this stuff that are relevant to the situation. And since the TRL of the project is quite high, we are going to test and implement and test and validate in real field operation, in real relevant industrial environment. So at the end of the day, Securegas has market-ready, market-available solution. And the three business cases, and I will conclude my presentation, we are going to implement all this type of things, have been designed in 3 different geographic locations, as I said, but more importantly, and also for in terms of replicability and scalability, they are targeting the whole value chain of the oil and gas supply. So from production upstream up to downstream, so as the demand. So thank you very much for
okay, thank you very much. Okay, right, we'll move into our panel session now, and we circulated to our panelists. Do you want to stop sharing your screen? Right, okay. If we circulated to our panelists 3 questions, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the first question, and then I'm going to ask each of the panelists in turn, and we'll do the first question in the order in which they spoke. So the first question is how to ensure cross-border cooperation to tackle potential cascading effects. And so I'm going to hand over to Panagiotis for a view.
Yeah, thank you, David. That's a very interesting question, since cascading effects could really impact a lot of domains and a lot of critical infrastructure parts of critical infrastructure. So I can see three main points here. The first one has to do with the risk management. So we have to ensure that we know the weaknesses of our environment. So by applying an holistic risk management, we can mark specific parts and specific topics on the environment, and we can have an estimation, an expectation of where a cyber attack could be deployed, and then what is the potential roadmap of effective other parts of the network as well. My second point has to do with the visibility. We have to provide the tools that could bring us a visibility of the whole network, of the whole environment. So, for example, in SDN-microSENSE, we apply an SDN layer where we can have real-time decisions and real-time monitoring of the whole network. So all the detecting and preventing tools that comes later on could be quite effective, and we can take a fast decision to preventing cascading effects. And my third and final point here has to do with the critical information exchange. We have to be able to have the ability to exchange information about threats, cyber attacks, history of what is happening maybe in different countries and different domains in a very fast and
excuse me, I don't know if it is only my problem, but the voice is very robotic, I would say. I don't know if it is only my problem or if it is for all.
So sorry for that.
Yeah, I've got a little feedback, but I'm okay. Please just complete, Panagiotis.
Okay. Just to finalize my first statement here, the exchange of critical information is quite important for having a history and some very important information about how the cascading effects take into place, and to have all the tools prepared for mitigating, for identifying and mitigating the cascading effects a priori.
Okay. Thank you very much, Panagiotis. So Lavinia? You're muted, Lavinia.
Okay, I'm muted again. Okay. So I want to reference a reference report from the European Commission that is related to the implementation of sector-specific rules on cybersecurity aspects of cross-border electricity flows. To sum up their recommendations, they have, let's say, recommendations in 3 areas. One will be baseline protection for energy system operators that should be implementing a minimum set of security requirements, including ISO 27001 framework. Another recommendation is advanced cybersecurity implementation of energy system operators of essential services, which includes the protection of current infrastructure, supply chain risk management, protection against cross-border and cross-organizational risks by doing risk analysis and risk treatment, and the participation in active early warning systems. Another recommendation in this report is the other supportive elements and tools, which are sector-specific guidelines on crisis management, sector-specific guidelines on supply chain for security operators. So my point for this topic is that we should treat this problem as a supply chain problem, because I think many operators do not have, let's say, a deep dive understanding what the cascading effects are. So they need to look across the entire supply chain for them and see what can happen. And after they have a deep dive understanding of the, let's say, point of failures, they should do exactly what my other panelists do, a thorough risk assessment. And then when they identify what can happen, they can open communication channels with other entities. But I think many operators do not treat this problem as a supply chain problem yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lavinia. Okay, so Christos.
Yes, okay, according to our view, the most critical aspect in avoiding the cascading effects, either locally or in cross-border situation, is enhanced cybersecurity. Following is the ability to mitigate risk through proper architecture. And finally, close collaboration between operators in order to utilize interoperable platforms. We believe that the combination of trusted execution environments and a hybrid key management and authentication scheme, such as one named Mensa, which was developed especially for the SealedGRID project, a high level of security can be achieved. This will ensure that there will not be any cascading effect, and we will secure an elevated level of protection. Part of all the other points mentioned, this is how we deal with the development of it.
Okay, okay, thank you, Christos. Sofia.
Yes, thank you. Of course, further from what the prior speakers have said, which actually signifies first sharing of information and collaboration across cross borders and within borders, and enhancing, of course, the cybersecurity levels. In Phoenix, we propose and we develop the incident information sharing platform. And what is that? This is for actually first acquiring a global situational awareness of what has happened regionally or nationally in terms of incidents, but also sharing vulnerabilities, assets, infrastructure topology, if not entirely sensitive information, so that then we can model the dependencies between these EPES infrastructures and or other type of critical infrastructures, and be able to model and decide on potential cascading effects when an incident is actually reported to a node of the I2SP platform. So in this way, we try from a technological and scientific way to address the problem, but this is not only technological and scientific problem, it's also a cultural and a societal problem that is currently being solved by formulating the ISACs. The European Commission, as we know, actually encourages the formulation of ISACs for different critical infrastructure sectors. There is an operational energy ISAC. INTRASOFT is involved further in the EU ISACs project that tries to implement further ISACs in different CIs. So the information sharing and analysis centers are actually agreeing to share such type of information and be more ready actually to address cybersecurity incidents, but also to minimize cascading effects. And of course, the CSETS network that is operated by ENISA. As of yesterday, the joint cyber unit has been announced that is going to be operated by ENISA, that will have this role of coordinating and monitoring incidents at the pan-European context. And I understand, of course, it will also address a response actions with respect to potential cascading effects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sofia. And finally, Clement.
Yes. Thanks. I'd like to take two elements that the other panelists already proposed. And I guess that here the problem is of two nature. One is the political willingness, and one is a strategic, let's say, focus. The political willingness is, of course, the willingness to cooperate among cross-border issues, among countries, member states, operators, which have networks that span cross-border and are naturally cross-border connected. But there is a political willingness that have to put in place this. What Sofia said about ENISA is for sure a political willingness, and it's quite relevant. I don't think this is enough. I don't think that always creating an overlayer and an over architecture solve the problem, but let's see. It's really something that on a pragmatic way, member state has to follow, and it's a cultural issue also for operators, which are sharing in their panels and in their forums, of course, issues that are dealing with cascading effect as well. But this has to be a bit more, I would say, open and transparent in my view. Then it is a strategic problem, because you can address cascading and cross-border only from a strategic perspective. What I mean with this, Lavinia say is a supply chain issue. I fully agree. I would say is a value chain also issue, which is slightly different, because as I've shown you with the SeCUREGAS business approach, so we are going from production to distribution. You can have production somewhere and the distribution is completely in another country, in another region, in another zone, facing other issues, managed by other operators and so on. Only in this way, so through a value chain approach, you can really be able to see which are the weakness, the points where this effect can happen and can have an impact not only on the specific value chain, of course we are talking about the oil and gas, but on other value and supply chain which are heavily connected. Of course, for the oil and gas sector, this is even more relevant, because the security of the supply is a strategic issue for Europe, is a political and geopolitical matter as well, more than in other sectors, for instance, but is there, is present, and it can be easily understood also by, I would say, stakeholders and by citizens. So that's why, again, and to conclude, the political willingness in tackling this type of issues is fundamental. And just from a technical point of view, a very, very, very specific matter, in our opinion, the segregation of cyber and physical elements should not be there in the future. I mean, we have two directives, fine. One is the NIS2, and one is the new proposed directive on the resilience of critical entities that look for an all-hazard approach, and I would say somehow look at NIS2 as a reference for cyber. Come on, I'm thinking that in the future we should have one directive that is tackling cyber and physical threats. Full stop.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Right, okay, if we move on to our second question now. So how to securely combine legacy systems with new technologies such as smart meters or connected appliances and devices without being exposed to cyber threats. And I think I'll run in the same order. And so Panagiotis?
Yeah, I think here maybe the most important thing is the authentication of the devices. This is a common problem in the IoT landscape as well. And of course, this is coming also to the power and electrical systems. So how can we provide real-time authentication to be sure that someone physically cannot replace, let's say, a normal device with a malicious one? That's the first important thing to secure the IoT devices and the devices inside the critical infrastructures. But this is not enough. I think we can also start discussing of the device certification. So by certifying and by applying certified devices in critical infrastructure, we can provide that, we can ensure that all the devices using has some minimum cybersecurity and physical standards. For example, they can cooperate with SCM tool, they can cooperate with the security tools, so we can ensure that we can have a good use of these devices. And another point here, and my final point here, has to do with the industrial protocols. As Martin said before, most of the cybersecurity attacks and threats are due to the low guarantee of the industrial protocols, since they have been designed not to support the today's cybersecurity threats. So by keeping up upgrading the industrial protocols and by enhancing them with some minimum security requirements like authentication, that would be very helpful for cooperating legacy systems with the today's IoT devices.
Okay, thank you very much. So Lavinia?
Yes, I compiled a list of, let's say, minimum security requirements for implementing OT and IT. I want to reference Bruce Schneier's book called Click Here to Kill Everybody. It is a very good description of the entire interconnected world, not necessarily related to to energy. But anyway, the list that I compiled of minimum security requirements would be to encrypt and authenticate data when moving in the network, data within the network. And I'm not going to emphasize on this subject because my previous panelists did. Then we should really implement security by design and by default. And unfortunately, this, let's say, expression has become a buzzword and people forget what it means. So under this umbrella, I want to clarify 3 points. We should keep in mind that every device should fail securely and predictably. So I don't know, if a connection fails with a smart meter, we shouldn't have a security issue. We should just be able to retry the connection and that's it. But unfortunately, with some OT devices, this doesn't happen. When we shift devices, especially OT, we should have security out of the box, meaning that security shouldn't be configured. Any device, including like home routers or something, they should come being secure by default. So no passwords that are the same for every type of device. Remote administration should be turned off and disabled, so the user should be turning that on. And another important thing under security by design and by default is not to ship devices with known security and hardware vulnerabilities. When we ship something, it should already be secure. So basically patches should be applied. And another thing that I want to mention here is that also in the realm of patching, in the context of energy, when we have devices, we should design devices with patching in mind. And I mean patching at a scale, because if we have to patch 10,000 devices, it's not the same thing as patching one device. So we need to have this in mind when designing OT, especially for critical infrastructure.
Okay, thank you, Lavinia. Christos, we can.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we agree with all our co-panelists, and I would like to add that in SealedGRID, we have developed our platform by design in a way that it works with both new technology and legacy devices. That is, with the help of gateways that ensure the interoperability between systems. We are currently in the pilot phase, as I already mentioned, and we are going to simulate different scenarios of architectures, including SealedGRID platform, new technology devices, together with legacy devices. And more details will be released through the communication and our publications of the project.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
okay,
you.
so Sofia?
Okay, thank you. Of course, I will agree with the prior speakers on what has been mentioned. It is indeed important, and we tackle it also in Phoenix certification of systems and devices. So we provide relevant certification guidelines as well. So a device, when to be used, or whatever system needs to be certified. In the same lines, we follow a security and privacy by design approach and a complete DevSecOps approach to detect and eliminate, minimize any type of vulnerabilities. Of course, the goal of Phoenix is not to secure harden the OT devices, but we use taxi and sticks for what is presented, and now they are published standards of OSINT for securely communicating the data coming from devices to our universal secure gateway, and from there on to the other components of Phoenix. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sofia. And finally, Clement.
Yes, thanks. So this is a very difficult question, I think, from a technical point of view, because you asked how to ensure legacy, introducing new technology without allowing them to be, corrupted or attacked by a cyber attack, which is a bit different story than simply making a connection, a plug-in connection. So we have done what also the others did in a different sector. So we have a very scalable architecture that starts from the field layer, which are the legacy system of the operator in place, and then going up, it goes to the situational awareness layer that release information to the public. However, I do not really have an answer to your question, to be frank, and I have to admit that this is an issue, in my point of view, very technical and very difficult to solve, because it's not just a matter of, as I say, connecting and making a scalable architecture, but it's a matter of, I don't know, making some stress tests on the new devices once they are engaged in an ecosystem which is broader than the one they are used to be, and what could be the effect of this new device on the ecosystem they are connected with. So we have not done specifically a test like this in SecureGAS, and maybe this could be an opportunity eventually for the future to discover also new vulnerabilities or to detect new anomalies that the combination of this new technology would imply. For sure, IoT is everywhere, and everyone is connected through an IoT device. The IoT devices are available also in the oil and gas sector, in the plants, in the installation, and so on. But that's a different matter, what you are asking for. So sorry, but I do not have a precise answer as before. But if you allow me, just to add.
We're running really just short on time a little, Clement. Could I, if I move on to the last question, if you want to so that we all have a chance to contribute.
Okay, no problem.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so the final question is how to address specific real-time requirements challenges of energy infrastructure components. And of course, that's something with the next generation energy system with prosumers, domestic integration is going to be hugely important. So I'll again go for Panagiotis to start off with.
That's a difficult question. That's a tough question. What means real time? And you know, in practice, real time is mostly replaced by near real time, and that's the main challenge here. For example, what is the minimum time needed for reaction to cyber threats? What's the minimum time needed for a CM to inform, let's say, the SCADA system or a monitor or an administrator? That's open questions, and I think this we have to open the ground here for a certification process. I mean, we have processes in critical infrastructure, but we have to certify them and to keep some minimum security requirements. For example, to keep a minimum time needed for informing about security threats. In SDN-microSENSE, for example, we tried to apply an SDN layer for real-time decisions and to open the way for very fast decisions and very fast control through several parts of the network. So we try OpenFlow and P4 for informing and having real-time decisions. But this is something hard, even though we have all the process needed behind for taking these decisions. Are the energy and power stakeholders ready to replace their components with such components for having real-time decisions? That's the main question.
Okay, thank you. So Lavinia.
Yes, I'm going to tackle this question in two parts. First, I want to mention three hurdles when implementing real-time data, is like from the architecture point of view. First, there will be the initial data collection should be done continuously and in real time, which is basically not possible because even if we have batch or micro batch data collection, we will introduce real time latencies. And I'm coming to the previous point that my previous panelist said, that we are not talking about real data, we are talking about near real data. Another problem is that we have raw data that is not very useful for analysis because some data can be should be removed or some fields should be summarized. So we need to keep this in mind. And another thing is that real data movement can be very cumbersome if you are writing to disk every step of the way, because we will be introducing latencies. Now, from the security point of view, I want to make a point that the challenges for data collection, real-time data collection, we need to be protecting data at the data point of origin. We need to be authenticating the data at the point of origin, and then to protect the data on the entire life cycle, meaning that we need to protect the data during point of origin, transmission, and storage through, of course, encryption and data authentication. This is very important. I also referenced the European Commission recommendation for let's say cybersecurity needs for real-time conditions. Unfortunately, even their recommendations are very broad. Basically, we kind of touched on what they said, but I referenced the report here.
Okay, thank you. Christos?
Yes, we also agree, and mostly with, as Panagiotis said, standardization and quantification of what real-time is considered is critical. However, in SealedGRID, we approach the issue by avoiding using time-consuming and heavy architectures in our platform, and we have managed to reduce the time response, thus achieving real near real-time requirements. Lightweight solutions such as trust management and web of trust work better on a peer-to-peer basis, avoid overloading the system, as we have witnessed in our testing. We considered that cyber health evaluation of the system is one of the important real-time requirements, with the aim of quickly detecting the system anomalies, isolating them, responding and recovering the affected system. Our approach is to deploy a set of agents strategically dispersed throughout the different domains of the smart grid, so that we can communicate information regarding detected anomalies, very, very fast in near real-time requirements. So based on this concept, our consortium has developed a process called opinion dynamics algorithm for the detection process from the agents, with the utilization of a single indicator that can quantify the global health of the system in near real-time data requirements.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, and Sofia?
Yes, thank you. I would agree. This is quite a tough question and quite even more difficult to be entirely implemented in different ways, technological, but also all the implications with respect to infrastructure implications, costs, etc. And of course, advancements of what is already existing in the EPS infrastructure systems. Just to add, in Phoenix, as Panagiotis mentioned, we also consider SDN and 5G networks wherever available and possible through our universal secure gateway that we develop, at least to take advantage of the bandwidth available through such types of networks and having data transmitted and decisions made in as near real time as possible. So I don't have anything else to add.
Thank you. And finally, Clement.
Sorry, I was mute. Okay, I agree with the others. I will just say the following. I will report on real data about what does real-time means, which does not exist, as the others have said. So the colonial pipeline, again, that I did, that I mentioned before events. So the attack was finally performed at 5 AM. At 6:10 AM, the entire pipeline had been shut down. That's the time we are talking about, maybe. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll bring the panel session to a close and now have go around each of the panelists, and we'll go in reverse order. 2 minutes on a recommendation to the EC to close the session. So Clement, 2 minutes on what would you recommend to the European Commission in this area?
Thanks. Now I have already a bit said. In my opinion, segregation on cyber and physical should not exist if we want really to move on. I have, for instance, copy and paste something that is done in the US, a guide to understand the benefits of it from CISA, CISA. In my opinion, that this is needed because there is another level of threats that sooner or later we have to face, or we are already facing, which are the hybrid threats, which are not the physical and cyber threats, nor their combination, but different type of threats, which will enter into the game with cyber and physical threats. So we need to make an effort in that direction to try to remove walls and segregation. I know it is not easy, of course. I mean, we are talking about this for many years. Maybe starting from points such as a certification mechanism and things that touch the real business operation would allow certain movements in that direction. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Sofia?
Yes, I would recommend what actually yesterday has been announced to formulate this joint cyber unit so that there is indeed a body that deals with real-time incidents and handling and cross-border information sharing, and tries to be aware of what is happening, the landscape across the entire Europe. I think this is very important on all the initiatives towards establishing information sharing and analysis centers, as well as creating sister networks, and now the joint cyber unit are in the very right path towards addressing potential critical cyber security incidents that could be at a more extended context than national ones. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Christos?
I'm going to be quite brief, since this is a very complex decision for the European Commission to take an even more complex way to implement it. But our point and our recommendation would be to give motives to state members to collaborate more closely to develop common standardization and policies that will consider state members different energy infrastructure maturity and technological stage, and also give more support to member states that do not have advanced energy infrastructures in order to close the gap with the more advanced ones, and with the aim to create a unified level of digitization, so as every research and development happening in one country can be, in one member, can be implemented in another, so everybody could see the effects, and this would be a unilateral implementation.
Okay,
thank you
very much. Okay, so Lavinia.
I want to emphasize one point. I think we should be treating this problem as a supply chain problem, we mentioned before, and we should do a deep dive risk analysis that shows every failure point and cascading effects. But I think that the EU could could utilize the new cybersecurity agency that is being created right now to actually help drive this initiative across all member states, because I think that we actually need, let's say, a referee or an arbiter, and surely it will help having something unified for all operators across Europe, at least.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, Panagiotis.
The first one has to do with certification and regulations, certification of people, certification of process, certification of devices. The second one has to do with the training. More than 90% of cyber threats are coming from inside. So we need training at all levels of technicians and administration behind. Final point, motivation. We have the technology. Are the end users ready to use it? That's the main question. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank all of you for your brilliant contributions today, and I therefore draw this this energy panel to a close. I think I'm the only person that's able to do this, so thank you very much. I thank you in the traditional way as speakers. We'll now be going into a brief 13-minute break before we start again at 10 o'clock with the from the point of view of the cybersecurity vulnerabilities in the health sector. Before our panelists leave, I'd like them to just take a quick look in the chat, and if they have any interventions to any of the questions that have been raised in either the chat or the Q&A, then I really would ask them if they would spare the time to give their expert opinions in answer to some of those questions that are raised. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll be back at on the hour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Well, it's 11 o'clock now, so I think we can resume this webinar as part of the consultation meeting webinar series. Now we are going to discuss about the healthcare, cybersecurity and privacy in the healthcare sector. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see better our panelists. Okay, now I can see you, perfect. So we are going to follow the same structure than the previous panel, this time focus on healthcare. And we have here 4 projects to discuss about some interesting questions. We have Panacea with Ivan Tesfaye. We have Curex with Manos Panousis. We have Asclepios project with Antonis Michalas. And finally, we have Sphinx project with Christos and Thanos. So the first question, it's about the regulations regarding the healthcare sector. As we have mentioned already, the directive on essential services. We have the medical device regulation, and we have the GDPR. So the first question for all of you is, how can healthcare actors ensure to adopt a security and privacy by design approach? Let's start with Ivan, please, if you agree.
Yeah.
Sorry. Somebody remind me. First, we have to give this 2 minutes introduction of each project. I forgot it. So let's start with your 2 minutes introduction. Ivan, please.
Okay, I share the screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it, Ivan.
Okay, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to share my perspective as Panacea representative to the discussion. First of all, let me introduce the problem context in which Panacea is addressing, which is the hospital environment, and not only. The hospital environment is characterized by high barrier to adoption of security solutions. Surveys and workshops conducted shows that even if the wide majority of the hospital respondents use advanced technology for sensitive data, 60% do not adopt appropriate data protection measures, mainly because of complexity, skill shortage, performance concerns, lack of budget, and lack of organizational buy-in. On a second level, human error is the lead. Threats based on human errors are perceived to have the highest likelihood of occurrence and are rated as the second most critical threat in terms of impact on hospital operations. And third, and final, for what concerns the medical device manufacturer segments, unfortunately, the situation is not better, where the medical devices are often not assessed against new privacy legislation. Security often lacks a dedicated policy. Vulnerability management is often not performed, and almost a fifth of hospital respondents stated that safety issues relating to cyber security incidents of medical devices were never investigated. So in this respect, Panacea built a consortium that specifically target 3 big stakeholder groups, which are hospital and patients. We have 3 hospitals in the consortium, which Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore and Fondazione Policlinico Gemelli is the leader, is the coordinator. We have a strong link with the healthcare segment. Industry and research, we representative from cybersecurity solution providers and insurance ensure the link with cybersecurity segment, and policymaker and standard developing organization, which, for example, RINA is one of the representative linked to the certification segment. With this consortium, we aim to assess, build, and maintain cybersecurity preparedness of healthcare stakeholders, supported by a suite of solutions, composing a solution toolkit and a delivery toolkit. The solution toolkit basically is made up to address both technical parts, covering dynamic risk assessment and mitigation, secure information sharing, security by design and certification, especially for medical device and IT systems, and identification and authentication solutions. while organizational tools addressing training, education, resilience governance, and secure behavior nudging, which is the people part. And I would highlight that the project is people-centric. As last element, to support the use of the solution toolkit and implementation on end-user sites, we foresee a delivery toolkit composed by 2 elements: a methodology to evaluate the return of investment of cybersecurity intervention, and implementation guidelines to help users to assess the operational context and to customize and fill the solution toolkit and other mitigation actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ivan. Now, Manos Panagiotis, can you present in 2 minutes your Curex projects, please?
Hi, everyone. I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Great. I'm Manos Panagiotis. I'm an associate professor of computer science at the University of Greenwich and the head of Cyber Risk Lab. So today, I'm going to very briefly discuss Curex. Curex is a European project. We aim at providing cyber risk assessment and risk control capabilities, sharing quite a lot of objectives with Panacea, from what I saw earlier. We're developing 8 software tools to look at cyber and privacy risk assessments, decision support for optimal recommendations, cyber hygiene, which is very critical, as you all know, in the healthcare. And we use blockchain to record the data that we get from the risk assessment and the recommendations of mitigations, so that then are shared with healthcare organizations. We have a few pilots that we're currently preparing, and one of them is the cross-border patient mobility. And I think that's quite key here. We're talking about cross-border today as well. We have remote healthcare services and also data exchange for healthcare research. Curex has received 5 million euros, as you can see here. We're a large consortium, including 2 hospitals. We're running until April due to the pandemic delays. And something I want to say is that the main contributions of Curex is to look at assets, threats, vulnerabilities of the organizations, compute risk scores when it comes to cyber and privacy, and then propose ways to mitigate these risks in ways that are affordable. On top of this, it's not just about technical controls, it's also about the human being empowered through training and awareness. And we have some unique ways through a survey we have done to identify where the organizations are now and where they can be by applying some smart ways of cyber hygiene for humans. That's it for me. I look forward to our questions.
Thank you very much, Manos. Now let's continue with Asclepios project. Please, Antonis Michalas, can you introduce briefly your project? You are mute, Antonis.
Yeah, hi.
No.
Yeah, let me share my screen. Right, can you see my screen?
Not yet. Yeah, now we can see it.
Hello everyone, so I'm Antonis. I'm co-leading the Network and Information Security Group at Tampere University in Finland. And basically I'm the scientific coordinator for Asclepios project. Now, okay, my presentation basically it's a one slide thing, and basically the project and this slide will be focusing mostly on crypto stuff, on applied cryptography, because it's the main idea that I used to basically write the proposal. Right, so let's assume that we have 2 friends here, Alice and Bob. You can imagine that Alice basically is a patient. Bob is an e-health service where, you know, all patients' data will be stored there. So what's going on here? We try to use build some new modern cryptographic techniques that will allow Alice to store her data in an e-health system in a privacy-preserving way, right? So let's see how this works. So first of all, we've got Alice. she generates a file, let's say with her patient data. This file contains some information, for example, Asclepios, security, coronavirus, whatever. And then she generates a symmetric key locally, which means that it's a key that only is known by her. So Bob doesn't have access to that. And then she starts parsing basically her file, extracting each of the keywords of the files, and then using her symmetric key to encrypt the entire file. So till now, nothing has been sent to Bob, and all the secret information is known only by Alice, right? So she generated her key locally, and she used her key locally to encrypt her data. Good. Now, this encrypted data, along with a list of hashed keywords, will be sent to Bob, which means that Bob cannot tell anything about the content of the files or about the hashed keywords, right? He cannot say anything. Now, the only thing that Bob can do is basically get all this information and store them in a database, in a local database. Right, so what's going on here? So Alice basically sends all of her data to Bob, and then she deletes all of her local data. So what can she do now? So let's say that she wants to find all of her files that, you know, they contain a specific keyword. So she can send a query to Bob saying, give me all files that contain the keyword Asclepios, for example. And Bob will be able to find all the encrypted files that contain that keyword without getting access to the contents of the file, but also without even getting access to the keyword that Alice is looking at, right? So this query will not say anything to Bob about the actual keyword that Alice is looking for. However, Bob will be able to find all these files and send them back to Alice. So this is one of the parts that we did in Asclepios. So basically, we tried to build what we call a cryptographic cloud storage, and we used the technique called symmetric searchable encryption, and on top of that, we used attribute-based encryption to have some kind of access control. And now the last thing is, imagine that we've got a doctor who wishes basically to run some kind of analytics on the encrypted databases. So for example, you know, that doctor can ask Bob, okay, how many users are corona carriers, right? Or something like that. So Bob will run something that we call functional encryption that will allow him to calculate a function of an encrypted data and return back to the doctor just the result of the computation, which means that the actual contents of the data remain private both to Bob and to the doctor. However, the doctor or an analyst will be able to, you know, run certain analytics on the encrypted data. And with this way, basically, we try to protect users' privacy. That's all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Antonis. Very graphic, your presentation. And last but not least, let's give the floor to Christos and Thanos to present their Sphinx project.
All right, I presume you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
All right, so my name is Christos Thanos. I'm the coordinator of the Sphinx project. Sphinx started in 2019. It's creating a health-tailored universal cybersecurity toolkit. It's piloting its results in 4 hospitals in Greece, Portugal, and Romania. We are in the final year of the project. We are in the process of integrating our tools, and we are already testing it. The toolkit and all the tools within it in simulated environments that are mimicking our partners' infrastructures in the pilot sites. We are hosting them on premises in sandboxed environments for increased safety. So Sphinx is a toolkit for assessing and reducing cybersecurity risks in hospital and care centers to protect privacy and data infrastructures. The idea is that it's a wide variety of tools that are in certain cases interconnected between them to provide feedback either for the current state of the network, its current status on vulnerabilities, but also to provide homomorphic encryption for the especially for the cross-border case of transfer of medical records, and also automated cybersecurity certification. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Christos, for your introduction. So now, as I said at the beginning, we are going to follow the same structure of the previous panel. We have now 40 minutes, more or less, to answer these 3 questions that we previously circulated with the panelists. And if you have any of the participants have any questions, you can use the chat box or the Q&A box, and we will try to answer also this question. So the first question, as I said, was how can healthcare actors ensure to adopt a security and privacy by design approach? And let's follow the same order. So Ivan, please, can you answer this question?
Okay, yes. In order to adopt a security by design approach, healthcare stakeholders need to establish the right context within the organization and ensure a proper communication. Let's take, for example, medical devices. The main actors are hospitals, medical device manufacturers, and institutions. Hospital, that's the first element. Hospital need to set up within the organization a clear and resilient security governance to prevent human errors and malicious actions, specifying security roles, responsibilities, creating security policies and procedures, and developing training and awareness raising programs. They take care of risk management to prevent, obviously, system failures and supply chain failures, and especially have a continuous compliance and assurance by adopting standards and show compliance through certification. That means perform often security auditing, perform security assessment, and last but not least, agreeing of contractual clauses with manufacturers, acting on procurement processes. The second element of this scenario is the medical device manufacturer. They clearly need to ensure that devices are cyber secure at design level, changing or better, improving the former safety-driven design guidelines, which is typical in the industry, enriching them with security elements. In this sense, I think a convergence of safety and security aspect is crucial to be considered throughout the entire design life cycle, and practically implemented and accessed at the requirement phase, design and manufacturing phase, deployment phase, and use and disposal phase. Also here, obviously, the culture of cybersecurity needed to be ensured at organizational level with proper processes, and obviously at technical level with adequate design specification. The very last element I consider is crucial is communication. Is very important to improve the adoption of the by design approach. From one side, we have manufacturers or providers of certified IT products, services, and so on, and they should explore the deployment and maintenance of repository, not only for publicly disclosed vulnerabilities, but also for shared security aspects of certified products, services, or processes, towards an alignment on requirements commonalities and ways to mitigate common security risks. So here the communication is very important. And last, policy making. This is already done, need to be strengthened. Policy making, in particular, acting on certification schemes, should include, to the extent possible, not only requirements for the end product, services, processes, but also assurance for the engineering process by setting process guidelines for software development, maintenance, and operations. And in this sense, indeed, in Panacea, we try to, through validation with real internal stakeholder in Panacea, but also external stakeholders, medical device manufacturing, lightweight conformity assessment methods for the basic assurance level that could be considered as a response to the existing fragmented landscape of software development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you. Now, Manos, please.
I cannot think of something that Ivan didn't mention, but I will go a step back and I will say what happens right now is that we have the medical data, which costs a lot of money in the dark web. So we're looking at a premium of 100 euros, while the credit card data can cost 1 to 2 euros. And this is something we have to look at in combination with what happens in the actual hospitals. So doctors, nurses, staff, even IT admin, sometimes unaware of how to protect themselves against cyber actors, but also how to protect the organization. So when we say by design, we can see all these technical things, engineering, test all devices, looking at extending vulnerability scanning to include Internet of Things medical devices. But I think we should look at governance. So we should have some approach where basically the hospital has a dedicated team, has experts, they have a CISO, head of security, call him whatever you like, but we should have some really good teams in the hospitals. Now, how do I know that we do have these teams? I have friends in hospitals, working in IT departments, doctors, blah, blah, blah. A key hospital, doesn't matter where, somewhere in London, have one person thinking how to solve security problems. Now, this poor guy has to take, an old car and make it very fast against a threat landscape, which develops as well as the MITRE association. So the attack framework, it's not a theoretic concept out there. It's happening now by threat actors. And so that I finish here and the rest of colleagues can continue, 80% among all attacks are realized within the healthcare sector, according to various sources. This is not just due to the pandemic. It was before. The medical data never change. So there's a long-term opportunity for exploitation compared to other types of data. So I think governance, step back, build the team in the hospital, put money in that, and then start thinking all the other super, of course, important things that our projects address and have great value to the European Union.
Okay, thank you very much, Manos. Now, please, Antonis.
Hi again. So, okay, having policies and having an entire team that will be checking, I know, network security and stuff like that. It's important and necessary. I also agree. But honestly, if you want to, because we're talking about patients' privacy here mostly, right? If you want to protect patients' privacy, the first thing that you need to do, and honestly, the only way that you should follow basically is to start updating your system by applying modern cryptographic techniques. If you still keep using the old crypto systems that exist, basically you will keep having privacy issues non-stop. Even if you have a team behind you, even if you set up a bunch of policies that say who can access what, there will be always the human error there, and you will be always having privacy breaches. So either you update your systems by incorporating and utilizing the power of cryptography by using new cryptographic schemes that protect users' privacy almost 100%, or basically you just sit there and you start having attacks. That's my opinion, basically. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Antonis. Now I would like to know the point of view of from Christos, please.
Hello. I agree to a different degree with Manos and Adonis. Also with Adonis, we were conscripts together in the army in KPS, if you remember Adonis. The point I would like to make is that in a different scenario, you need different things. So if you're talking about a hospital where the cybersecurity maturity level is low, then you do simpler things. The more advanced features and the more advanced tools that we're creating in our projects may not be directly applicable, or may not have equal impact. So putting money into the implementation of information security management systems means that you create a security and privacy by design in a hospital as an organization. So if you apply the resources, the costs to implement a system which has a process which goes around, which has checks, audits, and everything, then you have to a certain degree the ability to at least validate that you are somewhere and you stand somewhere in the line of that maturity. Afterwards, of course, once you have done that, then you are able to also apply better cryptography, obviously more advanced tools for vulnerability assessment and all the rest. Mostly what we create in the projects that we do is to prepare the field and prepare the road for those next steps. But the initial step is that to implement the actual system with humans doing the checks and humans creating them and implementing them.
Okay, thank you very much, Christos. We have now your different point of views. Now the next question is about the technology evolving very fast that facilitates the work of the medical staff and improve the lives of the patient. But the question is, how can we ensure that when a new medical device is deployed and integrated into a hospital context, is privacy and security compliant? Let us start with Ivan, please.
Yes, systems and medical device vendors frequently propose healthcare organizations to adopt new solutions to support clinical and administrative processes. And this raises basically two issues. To have a preliminary evaluation and final selection of the proposals that should include the consideration of cybersecurity robustness of the proposed solution. And once selected, the new system or device must be incorporated into the existing socio-technical environment, ensuring that no cybersecurity vulnerability is important from the external. So for example, in Panacea, we address this, allowing to minimize the risk introduced by the intake of the new asset by acting basically on the two stakeholders. The hospital then need to care about the procurement process. So involving, again, is a matter of governance, involving the right actors with the right competence and define roles at operational level with procurement officers of healthcare organizations, at tactical level, healthcare professional with technical positions or in charge of IT systems and equipment. And everything in line with a clear strategy validated by chief level executives such as chief information officers, information security officer, or chief technology officer. In this sense, it is advisable maybe to seek and exploit solution able to help technically healthcare organization to quickly identify the guidelines that are most relevant to their procurement context. And in this sense, ENISA released useful procurement guidelines for this purpose. And at organizational level or better human level to promote the importance of a good procurement process to ensure appropriate security measures. And this means, therefore, acting on cybersecurity awareness. The second stakeholder is, as I mentioned before, medical device manufacturer. They need to ensure that to the hospitals that their devices are cyber secure at design level with evidences. So again, one instrument that the hospital can do to ensure this is acting on procurement processes.
Okay, are you finished, Ivan?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Manos, can you reply to this question?
Sure, yes. Again, Ivan was very thorough, and it's fully true, that you have to start from the procurement. It seems that some manufacturers do not even allow to do some kind of pen testing, your own pen testing as a healthcare organization. This, can create major problems, and you need to have visibility of vulnerability scanning to include these devices, let alone that some of these devices, they even have default passwords, which is quite common in other fields, not just in healthcare. And segmentation of the networks doesn't work very well in this sense. So you have these devices with other devices that they have a massive attack surface. So what we need here is definitely some accreditation, BSI. It's expensive. And again, when it comes to hospitals, I can see how much they don't want to spend in cyber yet. They have improved, of course, but we're still not where they should be. So you get these BCI accreditations in the UK, very expensive. Then you have some smaller players in the market like the ASME consortium that they want to basically offer some kind of accreditation for IoT devices that they're affordable, and that's good. They offer also cyber essentials. I know that from research I'm doing with them. And then what you have to have some systems, coming back to the governance, that it has to enable all the things that colleagues said. Obviously, cryptography will have some insecure versions of TLS running in hospitals. That's from Forescout, that's not from me. Massive attack surface there. And say, okay, how do we actually go beyond accreditation and monitoring what we're doing here, monitoring these devices, that they don't just compromise data, they can unfortunately kill a patient at the end of the day, even, you know, as a random commodity attack, if not an APT. Yeah, that's something additional to what Ivan said earlier, but quite nicely.
Okay, thank you very much, Manos. Antonis, can you please?
Right. So regarding device security, hardware security, anyhow, you know, I know that this might be a bit tricky to be implemented on medical devices, but you know, the ground is already there. So what I'm talking about is, you know, there are some scientific ways where you can basically verify the integrity of a device as well as the software that is running in a device, right? So basically we have a verifier and a prover, okay, in a protocol, let's say. So, you know, you start exchanging some messages with them. You want to test the integrity of a device, right? Let's say that you are a patient or a doctor and you want to use device A. Now, before you start using that device, you can start exchanging some messages with that device. And at the end of this protocol, let's say, you can be sure that, first of all, that the hardware has not been tampered with, and the software that is running in the device is not malicious, right? Which means that it's basically exactly the version of the software that was designed by the developers, right? And then once you get these certain guarantees of the security and trustworthiness of the device, you can start using the device and you can be kind of sure that is safe. Now, you know, there are several ways to do that. The first things, the first approaches were based on something that is called trusted execution environment, and it's you know, a specific security hardware that you can find in commodity laptops, in many processors nowadays. However, when we are talking about constrained devices, where you might find in the medical sector, this kind of hardware does not exist. Nevertheless, there are different ways that you can still run certain protocols that you can verify the integrity of the device. For example, the latest work that we did at Tampere University, we basically tried to measure the energy consumption of a device when it is running a software. So you run a software, you measure the energy consumption, and by doing that, by taking those measurements, you can approximately figure out if the software that is running is the one that you want to run or something changed. You know, the version of the software, it has been somehow, you know, someone changed it, which means that there will be an alert and basically the software might be malicious. So you need to just drop the connection and stuff like that. So again, I think that science is the direction that we need to follow. We need to have some ways to verify the integrity of the devices and the software that is running in there. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Antonis. And now the point of view of from Christos, please.
All for these solutions, obviously different levels. I like the idea that we validate equipment both in the manufacturing plant as well as in the hospital when implemented. I would like to add that the medical device regulation that has been around for a couple of years is quite good. It basically is a subset of what you would see in a process in ISO 27001. So it defines measures, it defines the processes, life cycle, risk management, verification, validation, and all that. It's mandatory, which means that everybody would need to follow those guidelines to be compliant with the law. But the problem is who checks it. So if you don't have it in some way as something which is certifiable, then there's no process by which you can validate that the process has been followed, except if an incident happens. The continuous checks is the way that you verify and validate that such a system is in place, that the equipment do take security updates when needed and when in production, and that you have equipment which is certifiable and currently certifiable in each site. This continues on with the theme that I am going to give in all my replies, also in the recommendation, that if you start certifying the process, if you start requiring that, for example, the hospital is certified either by ISO 27001, according to ISO 27001, or other mechanisms, then that requirement will also cascade to the providers, to the equipment manufacturers, etc.
Thank you very much, Christos. Now we are going to address our final question, of course, related to coronavirus, because we cannot avoid this topic. So the question is, how can we mitigate the risks now or in view of the next COVID similar crisis? Let's start with Ivan again.
Yeah, the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated the value of e-health services such as telemedicine or remote patient care. In other words, in case of COVID-like emergency, the policy to keep non-severe COVID patients at home, plus the need for telemonitoring, expand the use of telemedicine that might have a low level of security. Also in this context, it's beneficial for the healthcare sector to consider cybersecurity as an enabler and as a key factor for ensuring the resilience and prompt availability of key healthcare services. So for example, a useful way to act is to consider practical use cases, such as secure activation of a telemedicine service, which target context is built on two main elements: patient's home and healthcare organization department taking care of them, and telemedicine system. For the first element, we need to assess how much the operational context of the patient's home assistant is secure, by evaluating risk profiles, for example, and identify mitigation measures to technical security issues, such as secure information sharing, for example, because of medical data. And acting at human level with education and learning material as mitigation measure to unsecure behaviors. For the second element of the telemedicine system, again, cybersecurity needs to be envisaged throughout the procurement life cycle. As I said, and is a sort of mantra in all our comments, IT departments should be involved in procurement activities to ensure that cybersecurity implications in the procurement of any product and services are going to be well understood and consistently addressed by healthcare organizations. This was my opinion.
Thank you very much, Ivan. Very clear. Let's go to Manos, please.
Sure. So I'm not sure if we will experience again such a lockdown and such pandemic, or will be less prepared or more prepared or whatever it is. But I'm kind of foreseeing a cyber lockdown, which will affect hospitals. Unfortunately, it happened actually. It's not, I'm not a prophet. It happened with the Mirai malware. So, and ransomware in general. So what I'm saying here is that we have to look at previous incidents have some kind of threat intelligence that is all over the news. Threat intelligence, you know, all the companies, all the serious cyber companies are doing threat intelligence, but we have to see what we learn from that. And I will go back to what I said earlier, that we need a team, be the best software in the world. If you don't have a person who knows their stuff, if you don't have a CISO, call him whatever you like, or call her whatever you like, then any defense is meaningless. You can change anything, you can do all the CIS controls, you can do all the NIST controls, but you need this person. Could be a virtual CISO, you can outsource that. I'm not saying you have to have a person there, but ideally you should, because security is part of the chief executive, is part of the board these days, and will be even more. And this is not for us to be happy that we'll have more work, but it is something that affects health, can affect healthcare even more. You know, I mean, I can give you small examples of friends of mine, doctors, that they tell me how their systems are, and they're so like an old car, that like I said earlier. So, you know, this is not good. And we're not far from having this budget. It's just they don't know what to do. When you don't have this, let's call him, since we're all academics here, professor of security in the industrial, of course, world, which is the CISO, then it's difficult to even go and change your, you know, your crypto stuff or whatever else you want to change. That's I think how we can make it better. Go back, get these experts. Don't get me, get the experts, get the CISOs.
Thank you very much, Manos. Antonis, please.
Yeah, I don't have a clear answer to that question, to be honest. But anyway, I think you know, my first thought is that I would agree with Ivan that, you know, if we run again into such a, you know, kind of unexpected situation and we need to act fast, obviously most of the services need to be able to run online, which means that you know, online services they must offer certain guarantees about their security, and obviously we need to have certain mechanisms for proper access, cryptographic access control, basically, and secure data sharing. But yeah, I don't have a clear answer to that, to be honest. Yeah, I think that Ivan, yeah, I agree with Ivan, but yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. You know, you might have the ideas, you might have the technology, but anyway, implementing this, most of the people would do it. It's very difficult to do it right, basically. Okay, I think that counts. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I agree. Thank you, Antonis. Now, Christos, please.
Yeah, I would also agree that special scenarios need special treatments, and despite that, it's a low probability, high impact scenario what we are going through. In practical terms, I would say that most organizations, and this is not only for the healthcare industry or the energy industry or just that, it's for every company. What we should consider is the degree and the safety by which we can accept that teleworking may be inside or outside the scope of our organization. So the degree by which we allow some control to individuals to some data, and not a blanket access to information in an organization to teleworking, or the amount of data and the security of the access points when talking about medical equipment at home. So to say it a bit differently, if each member of an organization who's teleworking, or if each patient who has his medical data monitored at home is given only the subset of information that refers to them, and only things that they have immediate control and responsibility over, then you can pass some of the responsibility to those individuals. Otherwise, you have to create a super secure system for teleworking, and that would include every piece of information that the persons would have if they were at their desks. So a decision needs to be made. I am not the one to make it. It goes case by case and organization by organization. To what extent we would accept, including teleworking and remote health data capture as part of the same context of the organization that is controlling that data.
Okay, thank you very much, Christos. I know it's not an easy question. So now to close this panel discussion, I would like you to express in 2 or 3 minutes a statement. What are your recommendations for the European Commission? Let's start with Ivan again.
Okay, yeah. Our recommendation, basically, my recommendation is on 3 points, basically. First, it could be recommended to policymakers, but also to medical device application providers and hospital, and it is raised already in the discussion of our kind colleagues, to sustain a continuous monitoring or compliance to information security standards of medical device information system along the whole development life cycle process, based on the different roles of these stakeholders: hospital for what concern procurement process, medical device for what concern the development and life cycle, let's say. This in order to trigger faster resolution with security health checks, facilitate auditability, reduce complexity and human errors during the operation and maintenance, therefore decreasing the overburden on organizational processes. By the joint focus on this aspect, both from producers and consumers of software medical devices, it is possible to reduce the gap of regulatory information asymmetry between these actors, producers and consumers, that can cause assurance unclarity and vulnerability. On the second point, considering the impact that their widespread adoption may have on cybersecurity, I would like to recommend inserting a more explicit reference, maybe, to security by design tools in a potential next version of the procurement guidelines for cybersecurity in hospital released by ENISA, specifying that they can be used in the plan phase, analyze and collect requirements, and in the source phase, prepare requests for proposal tenders, evaluate received proposals of the procurement process. ENISA guidelines has been used, for example, in Panacea in the security by design framework as a reference for the configuration of assets and healthcare domain-specific scenarios. And as a consequence, a taxonomy of assets and related scenarios has been introduced. So it's a practical example of implementation of ENISA guidelines applied to the risk assessment by design in a project. The third element, and I'm close my recommendation, considering that European Commission funding mechanisms allow to kick off many projects of ours, such as Panacea, Curex, and so on, that deliver solutions aimed at improving cybersecurity, and considering the need to digitize the healthcare sector after COVID-19, especially in the context of the Next Generation EU, for example, we recommend that maybe European Commission strengthen channels to promote the adoption of those solutions to the end users. This channel could be, for example, a co-financing fund, I don't know. They can be used by healthcare organizations if they use solutions developed through EU programs. This is just an example to, let's say, unlock the possibility to better take advantage of basically what the research project and the European Commission goes to for fund. This was my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivan. Thank you for your recommendations. Let's go on with Manos. Can you give us some recommendations?
So I have prepared some recommendations, but Ivan mentioned some of them. I will focus on one, as I said earlier. Governance. What is governance? I was talking about this earlier. According to NCSC here in the UK, how large and complex is your organization? What resources are available for security governance? How does your organization do? I'm just reading from the page directly. How does your organization do, and how important is security to those aims? Are there any external considerations, regulatory requirements, etc.? So in practical terms, the correct approach, according to what I read here, and that's the government, the NCC, the security decisions that need to be made are to be identified, the people who will make them, the information required to make sensible and informed choices. Now, these are not technical stuff for us, academics, who complex formulas, processes, algorithms, blah, blah, blah. That's great. This is our job. But when it comes to real life, simplicity, execution, and delivery of the complicated crypto or whatever other algorithm were developing, researchers, IBM, whoever was developing that, it has to go through this governance framework. So now, why I'm saying this, I haven't seen recently, and I may be wrong, please correct me if you know something different, I haven't seen any significant fund on this, right? On this kind of, it's not that it's not technical, but it's a little bit less technical than what we usually do. So I would love to see the European Commission coming forward and putting more money in that. I have to think what I would propose if I do research in that, of course. It's not that I have any prepared agenda, but I see these practical things beyond technical stuff. We have seen so many, intrusion detection systems, CM, crypto, blah, 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 TEs, and all of this in project. That's lovely. So many smart people working using this opportunity of the European Fund. That's absolutely magnificent. But we need a little bit to think, how can this be put in place in a hospital that my friend, an IT person, had to act as a head of security without having the actual thorough knowledge to do that. And this is not just about putting more money, it's about doing some research from our side as researchers, how we can enable this link between the research ideal world to this practical world of hospitals out there. So I think this is my only recommendation, thinking about everything we discussed today, and my colleagues here have covered so many important and crucial aspects of healthcare cybersecurity.
Thank you very much, Manos. Very good recommendation, simplifying. Now let's go to Antonis, please, with your recommendation for the EC.
Right. So in my view, I would like to have, basically a more transparent and clear distinction between what is research and what is innovation. What I want to say here is that when you decide to fund a research project, okay, I think I would do it in a kind of different way, in the sense that I would try basically to evaluate the scientific value of the whole thing, okay, the consortium, the outputs of the project, and so on. So basically, I would look more on the scientific part when I'm funding research projects, and then I would keep the innovation for the innovation projects. In other words, there is a kind of a need in every research project to justify how what you are building will make it to the market. I mean, just leave this for the innovation projects. I can assure you that if you are doing proper science, this will make it to the market somehow, and it will have a great impact. Honestly, it can change. I mean, if people are doing real science, the way we live our lives, it will change. Okay, there will be radical changes in our everyday lives. Now, if I have to just start putting effort on proving to someone how this thing will make it to the market, I just feel that, I'm just kind of losing my time there sometimes, and this is, or I need to put partners in a project that we don't really fit. So one thing is that. The other thing is, I would love to see a proper evaluation of the results of each project from EU, which means that, there are these review meetings, there are some kind of evaluations, but I would love to see a proper scientifically based evaluation. Like, okay, come here, guys. Let me see your publications. Let me see where you published. Let me see the ranking of the conferences, the journals. Exactly what is the scientific impact? Since I am paying you to do research, I need to properly evaluate your scientific impact, right? And this, I mean, if I want to take it one step further, this could lead eventually to a kind of ranking of existing, in a ranking of all authorities or organizations that got funded from EU. And then when you submit another proposal, your next proposal, you can see basically the reviewers can see the ranking of each partner in the consortium, something like that. That's what I have imagined at some point. But anyway, I would love to see a better separation between innovation and research and kind of a more scientifically driven evaluation of the outputs of each project.
Okay, thank you very much for your point, Antonis. And a last word from Christos, please.
I like the idea of Adonis about having research only, then research and innovation action, and then an innovation action only. Let's say that would work also with the third category of projects. That's actually pretty legitimate. It's actually a good idea. I would like to focus just a bit from what we saw, and finally what I was going to also conclude with is that there are different maturity levels in cybersecurity in hospitals, depending who you ask, what country you ask, what hospital, and what we all know from cybersecurity is that a system is as secure as its weakest link. And if you don't have some way to implement protocols or processes or systems across the board, then you always will have one weak link in the chain, and that will break the entire chain of trust. Now, what I believe would be a good step forward for the European Commission would be to make cybersecurity certification mandatory. And what we as research, as innovation projects, we do is create the knowledge and create the tools that either will be directly or indirectly applied to the sectors that we're building them for, in a way that they would reduce the cost of their implementation to those sectors. So the tools that we create in all our projects will be cheaper to implement in hospitals than if we let them to their fate. So a cost that the European Commission has now for our projects is a cost that they would avoid by making cybersecurity certification for hospitals mandatory. An example that we have from our project is the automatic cybersecurity certification, as I've mentioned it beforehand. If you have certain controls in ISO 27001, for example, implemented automatically with zero or next to zero knowledge by the IT professionals in the hospitals, that would mean that you automatically avoid the extra cost of installing tools, running tools, operating them, learning them, and all that. That cost reduction, again, it has a cascading effect that would allow you to be more strict with your directives and with your regulations, and being more strict with those without the amount of pressure and cost that the governments would lay on the European Parliament, would mean that it would be easier to implement a more trustworthy healthcare system in Europe.
Okay, thank you very much for your valuable recommendations. Thank you very much for, especially for the speakers today that we have in this very interesting panel. Thank you also to the participants that remain active here today. Just a final word to stay tuned to our website and social media, because we are going to celebrate a final consultation meeting webinar in the coming days. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye to everyone.
Thank you. Take care.